beautiful, beautiful, beautiful people. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you all are having an amazing, marvelous, and magnificent day. My name is TatiV, and if you're a true crime lover like me, please don't forget to like the video, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. Shout out to my first comment winner, Arnez. It says, hey, and thank you so much for your support, and shout out to you. If you would like to be the first comment winner, comment down below being the first one, and if I put the crown emoji under your comment, then that means you have won the first comment winner. Today's video, I will be reading from my handy dandy true crime book, and when I'm finished reading this book, I will be giving this book away to a lucky subscriber, so stay tuned for that. So let's just go ahead and get straight into the video. Sit back, relax, grab a snack, and enjoy some crime time. Warning, this video may contain details of graphic content. This channel is for mature audiences only. Some viewers might find this disturbing. It's not clear what life was like for Hannah Alamu in Ethiopia, but it's hard to imagine it could have been worse than it became when the 11-year-old was adopted by the Williams family in Central Woolley, Washington. Larry and Carrie already had 7 children of their own and wanted more, but her last pregnancy had left Carrie Williams unable to bear more children. It became a trend for homeschooling evangelical Christians in the mid-2000s to adopt needy children into their already large families. The families felt that it was a duty of their faith to rescue children that needed a good home and then homeschool them according to a conservative Christian curriculum. Other families from their Bible study group had adopted as many as 8 children into their lives. Carrie and Larry wanted to do the same. Larry Williams worked from noon until midnight as a millwright for Boeing, while Carrie stayed home to homeschool their kids. Carrie had attended a women's retreat run by a ministry called Above Rubies. During the retreat, they spoke of the trend among evangelicals to adopt children from Libya, a West African country experiencing political instability caused by multiple civil wars. In 2008, the Williamses contacted Adoption Advocates International, which is abbreviated AAI, a secular adoption agency based in Port Angeles, Washington. AAI was run by a woman named Merely Ripley, who had 20 children, 3 biological and 17 adopted. Merely informed Carrie that there were 2 orphan children in Ethiopia that needed a loving home. One child was deaf, and Carrie had studied American Sign Language before getting married, so it seemed like a perfect match. To prepare for the adoption, the Williamses took a quick home study course provided by AAI and filled out the necessary paperwork. AAI apparently missed the fact that Carrie had left one section of the paperwork blank, the part about their beliefs on child discipline. In the months leading up to the adoption, Carrie and Larry saw a 1-minute video clip of the children crying and begging for a good home. It was heart-wrenching. 7-year-old Emmanuel was deaf, and 11-year-old Hannah was slightly underweight at only 77 pounds. Emmanuel and sister living in the United States. Learning that their new parents lived in the idyllic countryside of the Pacific Northwest, Hannah naively read Little House on the Prairie in preparation of her new exciting life. In the months after Hannah and Emmanuel's arrival in 2008, the Williams post-adoption reports came to the AAI as per the adoption agreement. According to the adoption agency, everything in the reports seemed normal, and Hannah had filled out to a healthier 105 pounds. However, in June 2009, the reports suddenly stopped. Oh Lord. Although the adoption agreement stated that Carrie and Larry would continue to send reports throughout the children's lives, technically they were under no legal obligation to file the reports. The adoption agency had no way of knowing the atrocities that were going on in the Williams household. Oh my God. Larry and Carrie Williams believed in a strict, fundamentalist Christian lifestyle. In addition to homeschooling their children, almost all television and internet access was prohibited. They believed women should never wear pants, only skirts or dresses, and never swimsuits, and certainly never vote. The children were rarely seen in a public setting, and only socialized with a select few like-minded families. Larry regularly preached to the children in the backyard of their rural 5-acre property. As for disciplining the children, the Williamses adhered to the teachings of a controversial book called To Train Up a Child by Michael and Debbie Pearl. The book taught that the principles and techniques for training an animal and raising a child were the same. It instructed parents to begin spanking their children within the first few months of birth to break their will. Y'all, this is just a side note. I do not believe in whooping my children, putting my hands on my children. I do not believe in that. I don't whoop my children. I have a 6-year-old, and you all know I have a 1-year-old that has medical issues, and I do not whoop my kids at all. I don't think that's a right way. I don't think that's the only way to discipline your children. In this book, Michael Pearl's argument for beating a child came straight from his interpretation of the Bible. Pearl believed that Proverbs 13:24 justified his beliefs. Quote, "He that spareth his rod hateth his son." End quote. Pearl said, quote, "A child properly and timely spanked is healed in the soul and restored to wholeness of spirit. A child can be turned back from the road to hell through proper spankings." End quote. I can't believe this book was actually out in the universe and people actually bought it and read it. The book went into great details of specific implements for parents to use a wooden spoon, spatula, or the most popular weapon, a short length of small plastic plumbing tubing. This was a particularly well-liked implement because it could be easily curled up and kept available in a parent's pocket at all times. Oh my God. The book also taught parents to withhold food and put children under a cold outdoor garden hose as punishment. Oh my God, who published this book? next 2 years, Hannah's hopes of the American dream quickly washed away. Life with the Williams family was nothing like the little house on the prairie life she had envisioned. Within months after Hannah arrived to the United States, she began menstruating. This infuriated Carrie, who told members of her knitting group that she had wanted to adopt a little girl, not a half-grown woman. What? She complained that Hannah was a rebellious, telling her knitting friends, quote, "I wouldn't wish her on anyone," end quote. Friends and neighbors of the Williams family had noticed that Hannah and Emmanuel were often absent from public family outings, holidays, trips to town, or to church. On the rare occasion that they were brought to church with the family, one parishioner that knew sign language often attempted to sign with Emmanuel. But Carrie and Larry didn't want him communicating with anyone. One of them would quickly whisk the boy away before he had a chance to converse. Neighbors noticed the 7 children would be seen actively playing together at the front of the Williams home, while Hannah and Emmanuel would be left standing alone near the driveway staring at their feet. At home, the discipline was much worse than anyone could have ever imagined. Hannah had hepatitis B, which again infuriated Carrie, who accused her of purposely smearing blood on the bathroom walls. Because of this, Hannah was not allowed to use the bathroom in the house. She was only allowed to use a filthy outdoor portable toilet behind the barn that was only serviced twice a year. The indoor shower was off limits too, regardless of temperature. Hannah's showers was a garden hose propped up with sticks in front of the yard. Hannah was often forced to use the cold makeshift shower while the other children watched from the windows of the warm house. When Hannah made any sort of complaint about the clothes that Carrie had chosen for her to wear, she would lose her right to wear clothes at all and given only a towel to wear for the day. Hannah had long braided hair that she was proud of. Her hair was the one thing she could take pride in, and Carrie knew it. She gonna cut this poor baby hair off. The first spring of Hannah's new life, she was told to cut the grass in the yard. When she finished, the grass was cut shorter than Carrie had wanted it. As punishment, Carrie shaved her head. She would later shave her head on 2 additional occasions. The daily punishments had begun almost immediately after the children were adopted. Most of the time, Emmanuel and Hannah had no idea why they were being punished. It could have been for standing in the wrong place or getting an answer wrong on their schoolwork. They were never quite sure. A few months after arriving in the United States, traumatized by the change of environment, the daily punishments, Emmanuel began wetting the bed. Carrie and Larry were convinced he was doing it on purpose just to anger them. The boy was taken outside and was given a shower with the cold hose, then sent to sleep in the dark shower room. To add to his trauma, Carrie often teased him by running the plastic tubing she called her switch up and down his face. On one occasion, Larry hit Emmanuel on top of the head with his fist and caused blood to run down his face. That night, he was made to sleep outside, and the other children were told not to sign with him. The punishments themselves were often straight from the To Train Up a Child book and involved beatings with a piece of plastic tubing that Carrie kept in her bra. Sometimes it was one of Larry's survive in the outside world, Carrie snipped, quote, "It wouldn't be my problem," end quote. In the 3 years that Hannah lived with the Williamses, she went from sleeping alone in the barn behind the house to being locked inside a bathroom with no light, to eventually being kept in a 4 foot by 2 closet for up to 24 hours at a time. Larry's recorded Bible sermons and religious music played outside of the closet the entire time, depriving her of sleep. In the afternoon of Wednesday, May 11th, 2011, Carrie sent Hannah into the backyard as one of her daily punishments. It was a rainy spring day, and the temperature was in the mid-40s. When Hannah, only wearing shorts and a t-shirt, complained that she was cold, Carrie commanding that she do jumping jacks in the yard to stay warm. After a few hours alone outside, the children noticed Hannah's lower lip quivering. She seemed unable to control her own movements, had fallen a few times, and eventually had trouble standing up at all. Carrie went out the back door of the home and grabbed Hannah by the arm and led her to the outhouse behind the barn. She continued to fall repeatedly, which infuriated Carrie. She believed Hannah was only trying to create attention. Unable to get her to stand up, Carrie left her lying alone in the yard. Hours later, Hannah's clothes were soaked. Carrie set dry clothes on the back porch and yelled at her to come back inside the house. When Hannah didn't return, Carrie called her 2 eldest sons. She gave the boys a length of plastic tubing and told them to hit her on her bottom for not following orders. Strangely, as the boys whipped her, she started to remove her own clothing, and Carrie called the boys back inside. By 5 p.m., Hannah began throwing herself down on the pavement, gravel driveway, and grass. Her knees and hands began to bloody as Carrie watched from inside the warm house. When she couldn't watch anymore, Carrie turned away from the window and ignored Hannah for the rest of the evening. Near midnight, the 7 biological Williams children giggled as they continued to stare out the window at Hannah, who had removed all of her clothing and still uncontrollably throwing her body around in a fit. She was wallowing in the mud and pounding her own head into the ground. They watched in amusement as Hannah was experiencing what's known as paradoxical undressing. In the final stages of hypothermia, oh my god, the nerves can become damaged, causing irrational behavior. Oh my god, poor baby. This final stage of hypothermia tricks the mind into thinking it's extremely hot, causing the person to remove their clothes and attempt to bury themselves into the ground. What? Okay, there's a part where she unfortunately expires, so I'm gonna skip that part because she is a minor, and I'm going to go to the part where the 2 parents called 911. First, Carrie called Larry, who was driving home from work. When she hung up, she finally dialed 911. sons tried to carry her in, and she took her clothes off. She's very passive aggressive. I don't know how to describe it, end quote. During the call, Carrie sounded more annoyed than saddened or shocked. The 911 operator coached Carrie through CPR, but it was no use. Hannah was gone. When emergency crews arrived, Hannah had a large lump on her forehead, and she was covered in blood. Her hips, knees, and elbows, and her face had fresh red blood markings from repeated whippings. She also had a stomach infection. The post-mortem examination of Hannah's body revealed she was abnormally thin for just 13 years old. At only 5 feet tall, she was emaciated and had gone back down to 76 pounds. She was lighter than 97% of girls her age and thinner than she was when she originally came from Ethiopia 3 years earlier. The official cause of her death was hypothermia, compounded by malnutrition and gastritis, which is a stomach infection. It was determined that her body had been too thin to restrain enough heat on the day she passed. When Child Protective Services knocked on the door of the Williams home the following day, Larry refused to let them in. 2 weeks after Hannah's death, the entire family were interviewed by detectives and Child Protective Services. All the children gave the same story, obviously coached by their parents. Hannah was rebellious and, quote, possessed by demons, end quote. When Emmanuel was interviewed, he told detectives, quote, people like Hannah got spankings for lying and go into the fires of hell, end quote. Larry heard Emmanuel give that answer. He immediately stopped the interview and took the children home. 2 months had gone by with no charges brought against the Williamses when Child Protective Services received an anonymous tip. Someone claimed that Carrie didn't like her adopted children, and Emmanuel was being treated much like Hannah. With that news, CPS worked with detectives and opened a formal investigation. All 8 of the Williams children were taken into foster care. During a search of the house, police found a copy of the book To Train Up a Child. Even after months in foster care, Emmanuel was afraid of his foster parents and nervously apologized for every little mistake he made. Even asking his foster mother why she wasn't beating him. He told his therapist of repeated nightmares and constantly worried that he would be the next to pass. Emmanuel was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. That September, more than 4 months after Hannah's death, Carrie and Larry Williams were arrested on charges of homicide by abuse and first-degree manslaughter for the death of Hannah, as well as first-degree assault of a child for the abuse of Emmanuel. Carrie and Larry each faced a potential life sentence. Both posted bail of $150,000 each, but were given strict orders to not contact each other or any of their children, either directly or through third parties of other means. However, when Larry continued to send highlighted Bible verses to the children, the prosecution believed them to be coded messages, encouraging them to come to his defense. Larry Williams was arrested again and placed in a state jail, where he remained for almost 2 years awaiting trial. This wasn't the first time that the book by Michael and Debbie Pearl, To Train Up a Child, had been linked to a child's death. 2 other sets of fundamental Christian parents that employed tactics from the book had recently killed their adopted children. Sean Paddock and Lydia Schatz deaths happened in different parts of the United States, but were all adopted, homeschooled, and beaten with a length of 1/4 inch plastic tubing, as recommended by Michael Pearl. 7-year-old Lydia Schatz's parents, Kevin and Elizabeth, held her down, and beat her for 9 hours with a piece of the tubing for pronouncing the word pulled incorrectly. Okay, I can't. I have to skip this part. I'm sorry, y'all. Like Hannah, the abuse that eventually harmed these children was just the tip of the iceberg. At trial, Carrie and Larry turned on each other, of course. Don't they always? The couple sat at opposite tables in the courtroom, rarely looking at each other in the eye. Larry testified that the discipline was all at the hands of Carrie, while Carrie testified that her discipline was the instruction of her husband. Carrie also admitted that she told her children not to talk to detectives about any of the abuse. The children, however, testified that lying was considered one of the most serious offenses in their household. One of the Williams children, Joshua, confirmed that Hannah had not been homeschooled or eaten meals with the other children for at least a year before her death. The child told the court that she would sometimes go 2 days without speaking to her, and none of the biological children liked her, but it didn't matter because she was always in the closet. Manuel testified using sign language with the help of 3 interpreters. The courtroom was silent as he was asked what he thought happened to Hannah. Quote, "I don't know," he signed. Quote, "She disappeared. I think maybe she's dead." End quote. He also testified that he was often beaten with a stick or plastic tubing until blood ran down his face, telling the court, quote, "I would suffer with the pain until it eventually went away." Okay, and then I'm going to skip a couple more sentences because it's just going into detail of what happens to the children, and I don't want to get too deep into that. During the trial, the defense attempted to argue that Hannah was actually 17 years old rather than 13. It doesn't matter, that's still wrong, whether she was 17 or 13. If she had been 16 at the time of her death, the homicide by abuse charge could not be applied, as it only applies to children younger than 16. There was no documentation of her birth from Ethiopia. She proved her age either way. The trial was postponed to have Hannah's body exhumed for an examination. Tests on her teeth and bones, however, were inconclusive, and experts couldn't confirm that she was 16. The defense agreed that Larry and Carrie may have been bad parents, and their choices were bad, but they weren't killers and had no idea that their form of discipline would lead to the child's death. After 7 weeks of testimony, the jury didn't agree with the defense, and both Larry and Carrie Williams were convicted of first-degree manslaughter and first-degree assault. Carrie was also found guilty of homicide by abuse and was sentenced to 37 years in prison. Larry Williams was sentenced to nearly 28 years in